At our family Thanksgiving, my father publicly humiliated me by telling me to sit away from everyone. He said I lost my place in the family, and no one even looked me in the eye. Thanksgiving is supposed to be a day of warmth, laughter, and belonging, a day when families gather to celebrate love and gratitude. But for me, Thanksgiving has become the most painful reminder of the family I lost. I'm 23 years old, a woman who once believed in the strength of family bonds. I grew up thinking that no matter what, blood ties would hold us together through thick and thin. But this year, my dad showed me how fragile those ties really are. He told me, in front of everyone at our Thanksgiving dinner, to sit at the stranger table, and said words that cut deeper than any knife. You're not part of this family anymore. I want to share with you exactly how we got here, because this wasn't just a moment of cruelty. It was years of tension boiling over, years of silent resentment and unspoken wounds. Growing up, my childhood was filled with the usual mixture of love and chaos. My dad was a man of strong principles, sometimes rigid to the point of harshness. He was the patriarch who believed that family meant obedience and respect, but only on his terms. I was the oldest of 3 children, and from an early age, I was the one he set his highest expectations on. I was the golden child, the one who brought pride and joy, or so it seemed. I did well in school, excelled in sports, and never caused trouble. My dad would beam with pride when he told his friends about my achievements, but beneath that facade was a growing disconnect, a gap between who I was becoming and who he wanted me to be. I remember the first time I told him I didn't want to join the family business. It was a small, local company he had built from scratch, and he expected me to take it over someday. But I had dreams of my own, dreams that extended beyond our small town and beyond the limits he set. He didn't take it well. His face hardened, his words became sharp, and the warmth I once felt began to fade. As the years passed, the distance between us grew. I left for college on a full scholarship, eager to carve out my own path. That's when the subtle punishments began: missed calls, cold texts, and a quiet judgment that followed me home during holidays. My visits were met with tense conversations and the feeling that I was an outsider in my own family. After graduating, I found a job in another state and thought I was finally free. But life has a way of throwing balls. When I lost my job, due to layoffs, I had no choice but to return home. I hoped that with time, things would heal, that family would welcome me back with open arms, but the wounds ran deeper than I imagined. Thanksgiving came around again, and this time I was back under my parents' roof, sleeping in the guest room and trying to make the best of a difficult situation. My mom was busy preparing the feast, but there was a coldness in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. My siblings acted like I was a ghost, avoiding me or giving me half-hearted smiles. When the time came to sit down for dinner, I was ready to be part of the family again. But then my dad, with a look that felt like a verdict, told me I wasn't welcome at the main table. Instead, I was to sit at a small, folding table in the corner, the stranger table. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but his stern silence told me otherwise. The words he spoke that night still echo in my mind. You're not part of this family anymore. It was as if he was erasing years of memories, love, and shared experiences with a single sentence. I walked to that table, feeling the weight of every stare, every whispered comment, and the crushing silence of abandonment. Sitting there, next to people I barely knew, I felt the sting of rejection like never before. The warmth of the family gathering was nowhere near me. I picked up my food, my appetite gone, as laughter and joy spilled from the main room. That night, I left without a word, without a goodbye. The silence from my family was deafening. My sister later sent a message apologizing, but it was too little, too late. After I left that night, I drove around town aimlessly for hours. The streets were quiet, blanketed with a thin layer of frost, and the blinking holiday lights in people's windows only made it worse, like the whole world was celebrating, except me. At a red light, I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles went white. My eyes burned, not just from the cold, but from the tears I hadn't allowed myself to cry yet. And then they came silent, hot, and endless. I pulled into a dark, empty parking lot, and just broke down. For a long time, I just sat there in my car, sobbing into the steering wheel. Not loudly, not dramatically, just broken, quietly broken. It's a strange thing, the moment you realize your family has emotionally discarded you. It's not like a breakup, where there's usually some sense of closure or a final fight. This was different. This was years of tension that culminated not in a scream, but in a chair, a folding chair in a corner, away from the people who raised me. That's what hurt the most, the subtlety of it all. It wasn't an explosion. It was an exile. And everyone let it happen. When I finally made it back to the small apartment I was renting month to month, I collapsed onto my bed, still in my coat and shoes. I stared at the ceiling for hours. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just kept hearing it. You're not part of this family anymore. Like a cursed chant in my head. What did I do to deserve that? I wasn't perfect. I knew that. But I never turned my back on them. I never intentionally hurt anyone. All I did was grow up and choose a different path than the one my dad had carved for me. Is that so unforgivable? The next day, my phone didn't ring. No texts. No calls. Not even a passive-aggressive "Hope you got home safe" from my mother. The kind she sends when she's trying to guilt-trip me, without saying too much. Nothing. Radio silence. It was like I had vanished. Like I was dead to them. And maybe I was. Not physically, obviously, but emotionally. I had been buried, left out of the story, forgotten in real time. I spent that weekend in solitude. I deleted the family group chat. I muted my sister's Instagram stories when I saw her post a family photo from Thanksgiving, with the caption, "Thankful for the people who are always there." I wasn't in the picture. Of course I wasn't. By Monday, I started writing this. I wasn't even sure why. Maybe because I needed to be heard, even if it was just by strangers on Reddit. Maybe because I wanted someone, anyone, to tell me I wasn't crazy. That I did deserve a seat at that table. That what happened to me was not okay. Because if I didn't write this down, if I didn't say something, I was going to convince myself that I had imagined it all. That I was just being dramatic. Something my dad has said to me since I was 11. "You always make things bigger than they are." That's what he'd say when I cried over something he said. That's what he'd say when I tried to explain how lonely I felt growing up in a house full of people who never really saw me. He never raised his voice. Not often, but somehow, his silence screamed louder than any yelling ever could. You know what's wild? I wasn't always this emotional. I used to be the type to hold everything in. But something about this Thanksgiving cracked open a dam inside me. All the years of being told I was too sensitive. All the times I was the one who had to apologize just to keep the peace. All the holidays I came home even when I didn't feel wanted. Because that's what family does. It finally became too heavy. I realized I was carrying something that didn't belong to me. Guilt that was never mine. Shame that was projected onto me. And expectations that weren't fair. And here's the worst part. Somewhere deep down, even after everything, part of me still wants them to reach out, to call, to say they were wrong, to say it was a mistake. But they won't. And I think I finally understand that now. My father didn't say what he said by accident. He meant it. He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted to put me in my place, the place he thinks I belong when I step out of line. And the rest of them, they let him throw me into the shadows just to keep the illusion of harmony. Because that's what a lot of families do, right? They keep secrets. They sweep the black sheep under the rug. They pretend everything's fine as long as it looks okay on the outside. But I'm done playing that role. I'm done being the one who bends. I'm done making myself small so they can stay comfortable. I'm not writing this to get sympathy. I'm writing this because I know I'm not alone. I know there are people out there who were made to feel like outsiders in their own homes, who sat at tables meant for strangers, while the people they loved pretended not to notice. Who walked away from holidays feeling emptier than when they came. To those people, to you, I just want to say, you're not wrong, you're not dramatic, you're not weak, you're just done being treated like you don't matter. And that's okay. This isn't the end of my story. It's just the turning point, because from now on, I'm building a new kind of family, one made of people who choose me, who see me, who sit with me no matter where the table is. Even if it's a tiny kitchen counter with takeout, food, and mismatched chairs, I'd rather be there with people who truly love me than at a long, decorated table surrounded by people who only tolerate me. A week passed, then two, no word from anyone in my family, not even a fake hope, "You're doing well" text. It was like I had vanished from their world, and they were completely fine with that. At first, I kept checking my phone, out of habit. Every vibration made my heart skip, hoping it might be my mom, or maybe even my brother. But it never was. Eventually, I stopped hoping. I started turning my phone off altogether at night. I realized I was bracing for love from people who had long since stopped offering it, at least not unconditionally. And that's the part that stung the most. The conditions. Their love was always on a tight leash. You had to behave a certain way, speak a certain way, live a certain way, their way. Anything outside that, and they just cut the cord. I didn't notice it as much when I was younger, but now, looking back, it was always there. Like the time I cried in front of my dad when I was 14 after getting bullied in school. Never forget his response. "You're giving them power by being weak." No hug, no comfort, just judgment. Or when I got accepted into a college out of state, and instead of celebrating, he just said, "So you're running away now." It wasn't concern. It was control masked as disappointment. Thanksgiving didn't cause this fallout. It just exposed it. It was the moment the mask fell off. All the smiling family photos, all the awkward "I love yous," all the forced hugs, they had all been part of a play, a fragile act we were all performing for years. But on that night, my dad didn't stick to the script. He didn't just set me apart physically. He declared that I wasn't one of them anymore. And no one in that room stood up for me. Not my sister, who I used to share everything with. Not my brother, who once cried when I moved out for college. Not my mom, who used to say I was her mirror soul. Silence. They didn't have to agree with him, but they let it happen. And that silence was louder than anything else said at that table. I guess part of me still held on to the fantasy that maybe I was wrong. Maybe they just needed time. Maybe my absence would create a hole they'd want to fill again. But then I saw the family Christmas card. It was posted online. A perfect, glossy photo of all of them in matching sweaters, standing in front of the fireplace. There was a spot where I would have stood, a gap on the left side that would have been mine. But it wasn't. They had filled it with a family dog. Literally. The family dog was wearing a Santa hat and sitting in my spot. I stared at that photo for so long, the screen started to blur. I wasn't angry, not right away. I just felt erased. Like I never existed. Like I had never mattered. I remember walking to the mirror that night, just looking at myself. My face was tired, my eyes puffy, my hair unbrushed. I barely recognized myself. I said out loud, and I swear I did, "What's wrong with me?" And it hit me. I was still blaming myself. Even after everything, I was trying to find the flaw in me that made them treat me like I didn't belong. But the truth is, it wasn't me. It was never me. I just didn't fit in the box they needed me to be in. The more I reflected, the more things started to make sense. Like how I was always the one who had to smooth things over when there were fights. How I was always the one they came to for advice, but never listened to. How they expected me to perform academically, emotionally, socially, while they gave nothing back. I was the emotional punching bag, the reliable fixer, the daughter who was strong until she wasn't. The worst part, I still love them, and I hate that I do. I wish I could just flip a switch and erase the need, the ache, the longing for their approval. But I can't. Love doesn't vanish just because it's unreturned. Love lingers, even when it hurts. But here's where the shift happened for me. After sitting with that pain for weeks, after letting it tear through me like a storm, I woke up one morning and realized I'm still here. They may have shut the door, but I'm the one who gets to decide what happens next. And I don't want to live a life constantly trying to prove I'm worthy of love to people who can't see. my value. So, I started rebuilding. Slowly. I made a list of the people who do show up. My best friend, Jess, who FaceTimed me on Thanksgiving just to say she missed me. My coworker, who brought me soup when I was sick. My neighbor, who always invites me to her weird little book club, even though I never go. These aren't blood relatives, but they're family. Because family isn't defined by last names or childhood photos. It's defined by how people treat you when you're hurting. By who pulls up a chair when you're sitting alone. And you know what? I'm done waiting for my real family to do that. This Christmas, I didn't go back. I didn't call. I didn't send gifts. I didn't even acknowledge the group email my mom sent out with a generic Merry Christmas and itinerary. Instead, I cooked myself dinner. I lit a candle. I played music. I made myself the center of my own table. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. It wasn't loud. It wasn't joyful. But it was calm, and it was mine. Sometimes healing doesn't come from reconciliation. Sometimes healing comes from the realization that you can stop trying. You can stop begging people to love you. You can stop shrinking yourself to fit into their idea of who you should be. You can stop showing up to tables where you're not welcomed, and you can start building your own. It's strange how quickly time moves once you stop waiting. Weeks turned into months, and in that time, I built a quiet rhythm of peace. I started waking up without anxiety twisting in my chest. My mornings weren't filled with dread. My nights didn't end in tears. I wasn't happy exactly, not yet, but I wasn't drowning anymore. I picked up some freelance work, started volunteering at a local shelter on Sundays. I even went back to therapy, something my family always rolled their eyes at. Therapy's just for people who want attention, my dad once said, but I went anyway. And in one of those sessions, my therapist said something that stuck with me. You can grieve someone who's still alive. That sentence cracked something open inside me, because that's exactly what I'd been doing, grieving, not just the people, but the idea of them. The fantasy version of my family that I had built in my head. The version where my dad protected me, where my mom saw me, where my siblings stood beside me no matter what. That version of my family had never truly existed. And finally, I was learning how to let it go. Then something unexpected happened. I got a letter. An actual, physical letter. No one sends those anymore. So when I saw it in my mailbox, I almost threw it out with the junk. But I saw the handwriting on the envelope, shaky, rushed, but familiar. It was my brother, the one who hadn't said a word to me since Thanksgiving. I sat down at the kitchen counter, held the envelope for a few seconds, then finally tore it open. It wasn't long, just one page, but every sentence was heavy. I don't know how to start this because everything feels broken, but I've been thinking about you every single day, and I hate how we left things. I should have said something that night. I wanted to, but I was scared. Dad's shadow is bigger than we all admit, but that's not an excuse. I chose silence, and I see now how loud that silence must have felt for you. I'm sorry, truly. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know that I see it now. I see you, and I miss my sister. I read it once, then again, then again, and I cried. Not just tears, I sobbed. The kind of sobs that come from a part of you you didn't know still had hope left in it. Because no matter how strong I tried to be, there was still a piece of me that wanted someone in that family to remember me, to fight for me, and finally, someone had. I didn't write back right away. I needed to sit with it. I needed to understand whether his words came from guilt or growth. But a few days later, I sent him a short text. Got your letter. Thank you for being honest. I needed to hear it. I'm not ready for a full conversation yet, but I appreciate it more than you know. His reply came just 3 minutes later. Whenever you're ready. No pressure. I'll wait. That was the first olive branch. And for once, it didn't come wrapped in manipulation or guilt. It was simple, genuine. It gave me a small, cautious sense of hope. Not for full reconciliation, but maybe a small crack of light in the wall that had been built between us. But with that hope came a flood of new questions. What if my brother was trying, but the rest of them weren't? What if he wanted to fix things, but they still saw me as the outsider? Could I even walk back into that world, even just to visit him, without reopening old wounds? And perhaps the hardest question of all, did I even want to? I sat with that for weeks. Meanwhile, spring came, the snow melted, the sun stayed longer in the sky, and the world outside started to feel alive again. One Sunday, I was at the shelter, helping organize supplies, when a little girl, no older than 6, walked up to me, holding a torn stuffed animal. "Can you fix him?" she asked, her eyes wide. I smiled. "I'll try." And as I sat there sewing the ripped seam with shaky fingers, I realized how symbolic that moment was. We don't always know how to fix things, but sometimes just the act of trying means everything. It doesn't erase the damage, but it shows care. I started journaling again after that, just a few lines a day. At first it was messy, angry, confused, but over time, my entries shifted. I stopped writing about what they did and started writing about what I deserved. Love that wasn't conditional. Conversations that weren't one-sided, hugs that didn't feel like performance art. Space to be exactly who I am, even if that person wasn't what they expected. Then came Easter. I didn't plan to go home. I hadn't spoken to my parents since Thanksgiving, not even once. But my brother asked if I'd meet him for coffee. Neutral territory. Just him and me. I said yes, and I'll be honest, I was terrified. The coffee shop was quiet, a little corner place downtown. I got there first, sat near the window. My hands were shaking. My heart was a drum in my chest when he walked in. He looked the same, but different. Older, tired, nervous. We hugged. It was awkward, but it was real. The conversation started slow. Small talk, updates, long pauses. But then he looked at me and said, "You were right to leave." I blinked. "What?" "You were the only one brave enough to step away." We all felt it. The pressure, the judgment, the control. But you were the only one who said, "No more." I used to be mad at you for that. But now, I get it. I envy it. I didn't expect that. I didn't know what to say. But I realized in that moment, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. Not to hurt others, but to save yourself. And when you do, you might just give others permission to do the same. A few days after that coffee with my brother, I got a message I wasn't expecting. It was from my mom. Just 5 words. "Can we talk? Just us." I stared at the screen for a long time. So many emotions all at once. Fear, anger, curiosity, grief. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to stay in the peace I had fought so hard to build. But another part of me, the child still hoping her mother would finally choose her, said, "Maybe this is it. Maybe she's ready to be honest." So I replied, "Only if it's just us. No guilt, no games." She agreed. We met at the park. No makeup, no smiles. Just 2 women who used to be mother and daughter, now standing as strangers. She sat on the bench and immediately looked down, wringing her hands like she was trying to wash off years of silence. Then she said, "I let him do it. I let him tell you to sit at that table." And I said nothing because I was afraid of him. I've always been afraid of him. And I know that doesn't make it right. But I need you to know, that day broke me too. My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say. She continued, "You were always the one who asked the hard questions, the one who didn't shrink. And instead of being proud of that, I punished you for it, quietly. I stood beside your father when I should have stood beside you. And then, for the first time in my entire life, my mother cried in front of me. For me. I let her speak, and then I said the thing I never thought I'd say out loud. You didn't protect me. You watched me sit alone at a table and did nothing. I begged for years for someone to see me, not who you wanted me to be, but me. And you looked away." She nodded through the tears, didn't interrupt, didn't make excuses, just listened. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't speaking to my mother. I was speaking for myself, for every version of me that had stayed quiet. And I finally heard my own voice. We didn't hug when we left. There were no promises of a new beginning. Just a quiet, broken honesty between us. And honestly, that was more closure than I ever thought I'd get. As for my dad, he never reached out, not once, no apology, no explanation, not even a single text. And I've accepted that now. Some people don't say sorry, not because they don't feel guilt, but because admitting it would shatter the illusion they've built around themselves. My dad is one of those people, and I'm finally okay not chasing his approval. This year, I spent Thanksgiving in my own apartment, just me, my roommate, and 2 friends from the shelter. We ate on paper plates, laughed until we cried, shared stories about our weirdest family memories. And when I looked around the room, I didn't feel like an outsider anymore. I felt chosen, included, home. So, if you've ever been pushed to the stranger table, if you've ever been told, with words or silence, that you're not enough for the people who raised you, let me tell you this. You are not the problem. You are not too much. You are not wrong for choosing peace over performance. You are not broken. You are the cycle breaker. The one brave enough to leave the room when love becomes conditional. One strong enough to rebuild a life from scratch. And I see you. I don't know what next year will bring. Maybe more distance. Maybe quiet healing. Maybe nothing. But I know this much. I will never sit at a stranger table again. Not because they don't offer me a seat, but because I've finally built a table of my own. And everyone sitting there knows exactly who I am and loves me anyway.